Everyone, welcome back to the Isaiah Edward podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me, graffiti artist, mural artist out of Trenton, New Jersey, a good friend of mine, marketing partner, and someone I really love to hang out with, Leon Rainbow.
Hey, good seeing you again and everything.
We talked about this moment of getting this episode done. You're somebody I wanted to have this conversation with for many reasons. Not just for who you are, but just your story and like your skill set and just like everything you represent. You're like one of our favorite people.
I appreciate it.
We really do like just who you are in general, right? Like we're actually sitting right here next to your art. Isn't this awesome, right? Like,
awesome.
Right here in the shot, just setting the environment up correctly.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite pieces. Me and my homie Booster did these pieces over here. And, the good thing about this project is they kind of gave us some loose guidelines, but they let us really do our thing, and we were able to really collaborate just really freely and kind of as ideas happened and how we incorporated things, we were able to just do things on the fly. And I really feel like at least the way that I work best in that type of creative environment where we're able to create on the spot, which you don't always get to do that. A lot of times it's either you're getting paid and you're able to be creative, you're getting paid and you don't have that much creative freedom, or you're not getting paid and you do what you want. You know what I mean? So those are, as being a graffiti artist and a muralist, those are usually our two situations. It's good though when you're able to get a project where you're able to have a lot of creative freedom and you're able to get compensated fairly also. So those are the best projects for me.
How hard it is to navigate like expressing yourself as an artist, but also being in the confines of people's desires and preferences. But before we get to that, of course we have to just acknowledge this, but before we get to that, you weren't always this amazing person I know now.
Right.
Many of my guests, it's always that origins, right? Like, who were you before you got to this point of being an artist? Like, were you always an artist as a child, or did you go through things where art was revealed to you? Like, how did you get to this discovery?
I mean, I've always been an artist, you know what I mean? Like, I've always had artistic talent, I've always wanted to be an artist, It's been a long journey to get here, you know what I mean? When, I guess like when I was real small, I used to do Bristol blocks, which is before your time, but it was like where you're kind of building things out of blocks that stick together. Probably older people would know that. But, I know that's like way before. And then I guess in the 80s, I guess I was probably around first grade. That's when Star Wars came out, which was a movie. That was breakdancing, rap, DJing, MCing, the Four Elements type thing. That's when it first went mainstream. At that time I was living in California, and when I seen kids painting on trains, it just blew my mind. I was just like, yo, this is wild. There's these 15-year-old kids in New York painting on trains, you know what I mean? It was just so wild, so illegal, and just so, just the whole thing that they were just doing it without permission, and just that lawlessness, that was the first thing that really, I was like, damn, they're breaking the rules, you know what I mean? As a kid, you're like, damn, these kids is wild, you know what I mean? And then just seeing they're creating what they're doing is beautiful, and then trying to figure out how they do the letters and different things and how they're using spray paint. It was a whole different thing, but I didn't live near subways, you know what I mean? I lived in California. At that time, I lived in a rural area. And then eventually, I moved to San Jose, California. I moved back and forth to New Jersey a little bit. My stepfather moved us back and forth. And when my mom and my stepfather divorced was a trying time for me, I found out my stepfather wasn't my real father. His side of the family disowned me, so that was rough, And then my mom sent me to live with my grandparents in San Jose, California. That was I guess probably when I was in 8th grade, say. So, and that was probably 88, 89 in that era. And that's when I lived in a city, and during that time, they had this thing called bus hopping. So what it was like you could ride everywhere in our county on a bus for $1. So what we used to do, we get our dollar, we cut school, and then we'd get on the bus and we'd tag on the bus and just ride all over and tag, and then what we called racking was we go to different art stores, steal supplies, stuff like that, tag on the bus. So it was just a wild time.
You had like a little crew you were running with, like
yeah. I was trying to get into different crews. This is like junior high into early high school, and it was just one of those things that I had got in trouble and stuff, but it was like just trying to it was like really my first introduction to really creating or just doing graffiti, you know what I mean? Even though it was the vandalism part, that's why I tell people, like, if I never caught that tag on that bus, I wouldn't be here painting these murals in stadiums, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like,
so
I relate to like the whole street lifestyle. Like, you're giving me the California perspective, being from New York, right. Our worlds clash, like with skateboarding and art. Like, skateboarding was lawless like that, anarchist, like very against the rules because it was illegal. Right. I was just expressing my art, my form of art. So it's interesting that like as a child, that's how you got into it. But you were looking here.
What's eventually is that I did get to New York too.
So you eventually got to New York. What about like, I mean, this is like a side question, right. But like I hear this as well, but like, did you kind of avoid like the correlation between like the street hanging out type of stuff and that? Because like in New York, the way I know of graffiti, like you're either like just part of that like skateboarding type of culture, or like it could be like gang culture as well. Mm-hmm. Was it like that in Cali, or was it just like
California, is just where we lived was like a very violent era, you know what I mean? Where we lived, it was just like, when they say gang infested, it was gang, because where I lived, after I moved back out to the East Coast, like, Google, PayPal, eBay, all those companies, it became the Silicon Valley. But in the early 90s, that was just starting. So, it was poorer. So there was a lot of violent stuff going on. They had they had party crews. Everybody had some type of group when I was in California. So it's like you had to have some type of crew, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So just being in graffiti, but a lot of the kids were into like tag banging. So it was like basically you're doing graffiti, but it's like you're in a gang, you know what I mean? So you're beefing with other gangs or other graffiti crews. And then, eventually a lot of the guys that I was into graffiti with, they had gotten into gangs. So it was kind of like a introduction into, gangs. I mean, California has deep history of, Bloods and Crips, stuff like that, like street gang type of mentalities. So what happened was I had gotten in trouble. I got brought home a couple times for doing graffiti and stuff like that. And I came back to my house in New Jersey, and, I stayed there for the summer. And it was almost time for me to go back to California. And my mom was like, "You're not going back to California to give my parents a heart attack or whatever, right?" And I was like, "Man, how you going to stop me?" And then my mom just took the plane ticket and just ripped it up and threw it in my face. And at that point, I realized, fuck, I'm not going back to California. It became a reality that you're not going back to California. That's done. You know what I mean? It was a rough change. It was crazy because, I lived on both coasts. And the cultures were very different, especially because when I lived in New Jersey, I lived in like suburban New York, like Wayne, Ringwood, Wanacue, like I guess probably like the suburbs of Patterson, right? So that's like North Jersey. Like we're about 45 minutes to an hour from New York. So what wound up happening when I moved up there, at least where I was, there wasn't graffiti. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like suburban area.
Suburban area. It was like there was nobody doing graffiti. And what happened was a lot of people were into drinking, smoking weed, doing drugs. And so that was the next thing that I went into. You know what I mean? And like the graffiti and creating art and all that just kind of got pushed aside. You know what I mean? And then, I started getting heavier and heavier into drugs, selling drugs, just like once I realized that, a nickel bag in New York is a dime bag in New Jersey, that's it. You know what I mean? That's finance right there. You know what I mean? And I never made a lot of money. When I look back at the time in my mind, I was balling out. You know what I mean? But I was just making enough to keep myself high all the time. You know what I mean? And I worked, kind of odd jobs. My mom was house cleaning, so I'd clean houses with her. She'd pay me in cash. I'd go to New York. Like, I used to go to New York almost every day, and I never even drove, like, that type thing.
Just adventuring. So,
And then, yeah, that's when I started getting into, like, going to, the Village and, Soho, and just, I guess in that era was, like, towards the middle of, like, the rave. That's what I started getting into, like, going to kind of rave warehouse parties. I guess they call them festivals now, but it was just like illegal parties and, just doing as much drugs as I could. That was the whole thing.
big transformation, right? Fell in love with the art, was doing it the way it's done as a child.
Right.
And just like, not as a professional, just as an expressionist.
Right.
Like even skateboarding was still considered illegal, even though I'm just doing
Right.
Right. But then you move here, you start living with your mother, New Jersey, more upstate. But you started getting that taste of New York life, but you curbed the career, right? And you got to this party life. I'm assuming it got worse and worse.
Absolutely.
When was the changing point where it's like, this is enough? Was it like, did you go back to normal because of the art, or was it because of just reality?
So what happened was, I guess in 96 was really when things started. So I kind of got into, they call it an art school, but now I realize it was a scam. It was the Art Institute. So my mom dropped me off in Philly with a bag of clothes. The crazy thing was, like, the first week I was there was a blizzard. The snow was 3 feet deep. That was the biggest blizzard I ever been in my life. And it was like I was just totally unprepared to be on my own in a city where I didn't have a job, but I still hustled. I still, like, man, that was the first time in my life I ever went hungry, like, where I just didn't have food. I had people that did look out for me. I couldn't find a job. Everybody, like, Wawa, there was like 50 people ahead of you. Everywhere I tried to get a job was like, and then by the time, so I was there for 6 months, and they just, like, I didn't realize it, but it was like one of those things where they just give you loans and loans and loans. And, I left school. I couldn't afford to be there anymore. And
At this point, what are you, like 20 something, 30 something?
no, man, I was like, maybe, it was a year after high school. So it was like, I graduated in 94. This was like 96. So this 2 years after high school. So I just bullshitted around. Like, it was like that, where I didn't have, my mom was getting tired of me. I didn't have anything else to do. We found, it's like, the artist too is like, they just let anybody in, basically. You know what I mean? You show a portfolio, they let you in. If you can't pay, they just take your money until you can't pay. Then they, you know what I mean? Eventually, I knew a person that, like, did wind up graduating from there, but it was like, his dad had bread though, so he's like, I think it cost him like $100K or something like that. But now schools are like that, but it's like they didn't really deliver what they said they was gonna. But that's neither here nor there. So what happened was, I dropped out of school after 6 months. Same thing I was doing: raves, selling drugs, going to parties. I was doing in Philly, that I wound up finding the same type people and doing the same type things over there. And then, so when I moved back to North Jersey with my mom, like, same type thing. I was just back doing the same type things. And eventually, I wound up getting the house raided. So,
See you on the next episode.
there you go. It was just like, that was it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so
it got even worse even after trying to do the school thing, right?
Right. It was just one of those, I come from an era where, I don't know, I'm working class white people, was my family. My real father is Native American, but I didn't meet him till I was like 15, and I didn't really build a relationship with him till I was much older, like he passed like a few years, like at the beginning of COVID, but like for like 20 years I had, from like 2000. Like, no, I had built a relationship with him but before that, I didn't really have that much of a relationship with my father. And like, but it's just, I say that to say that I just, people weren't like prepared. We didn't know about all that, or it seemed like people didn't know. I don't know why they didn't know, but it's not like my parents set you up for college. There was no college fund. There was no, it's just, we weren't really ready. And then plus I was just wild. You know what I mean? I was just, like I said, I was just doing what I wanted and just, running the streets. It was hard because my mom, was a single mother, and I was just not controllable. You know what I mean? I just was wild in the streets. You know what I mean?
I relate to that, right, Leon? Because it's like same thing. I grew up with a single mother.
Right.
I didn't grow a relationship with my father till later on.
Right.
I wasn't ready for college, right? Even though like I made myself push through it.
Right.
I wasn't ready when I went. That's a quick way to spend a lot of money, right? And especially something like of our nature, what we do now. Right. That's not where you go.
Right.
That's the place you go for learning, right? You have to do to learn in our fields. So that failed. That's fine, right? You get through that, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
Right.
The original question was, what was that turning point?
So this is the turning point. So I'm getting to that. So basically, once I got the house raided, then for like a few more months, I got arrested on bail. And then from there, I was facing going to prison, right? So my choices had changed. You know what I'm saying? I realized that, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have no money to go to rehab. I didn't want to go to jail, obviously. I had, when I caught those charges, I had done a little bit of county. Once I went to the county, I realized, first I was like, I was in Patterson. Everybody was from Patterson. I didn't know anybody. I thought I would know people. It wasn't like that. You know what I mean? And I realized at that point, like, that wasn't what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? I didn't know what else to do, but I knew that's not what I wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? So I wound up finding the Salvation Army. They had a free drug program, work program, and basically you work for free, and they gave you 3 hots and a cot. They gave you all the food, clothing, shelter that you needed, and I was able to start my recovery. And when it was time to go to the judge, they sent them a letter saying that I was there and I was getting treatment, and I don't know. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I didn't want to do that, but I was able to, because my idea was like stop selling drugs or stop using drugs so I could sell the drugs, so that I could, do all this kind of stuff. But like how you're saying with God, that was like my reintroduction to God was at the Salvation Army in Trenton. You know what I mean? Wow. And it like also in recovery, I didn't know that there was a different way. I didn't know about a lot of the different things that I was having, and I had to learn like a lot of the childhood traumas and different things. Those were the reasons why I used drugs, not the only reasons, but there was a lot of different things that I had to work through.
Do you feel like people do those things, or for yourself, explain for yourself, like, was it more of like a suppressant thing because I'm in pain, or was it more so of like, I need to be distracted type, like I want excitement, I want adventure in my life? Which one? Because for me, anything I've done in my life, I feel like it was always more of a suppressant, like I don't want to feel like this, I want to feel something.
It's like, what do you call it? It's all of that, to me.
Once, yeah.
Right, because, that's the thing why it makes it so tricky, because, I used when I was happy, I used when I was sad, I got high to get high, and just like all those different things play into it though, like all the disappointments that I had, all the, getting disowned, all those feelings of being alone and, not being wanted, different things, like all those play into it. And, those are deep down issues. And if you don't deal with that, and then, you think you're having fun when you first start, you know what I mean? And it is fun at a certain point, until it isn't, until you're getting your house raided, until, tearing up your relationships. Because, me, my mom and my sister, it was like us against the world, I really relate to the Dear Mama Tupac song. That's one of my favorite songs, you know what I mean? Because it was like, even though my mom didn't use crack, obviously, but at the same time, it was just us against the world, you know what I mean? But I tore that up, you know what I mean? Just by living the way that I was, you know what I mean? But what happened was, once I was able to, get out of the Salvation Army and get into recovery. I still go to 12-step fellowship meetings, and I'm able to, maintain, you know what I mean? And what happened was new possibilities arose. I had to do a lot of work. I went to Mercer, got an associate's degree, and then, throughout different parts of my life, I had different mentors, you know what I mean? Like once I went through college, I met this artist, Pose 2. He was a big mentor of mine. He lives in San Diego now, but we still talk and stuff. But a lot of the stuff that he was doing, I wanted to do, you know what I mean? He was from a big graffiti crew. They were doing all these beautiful graffiti productions. And
you just like the kid with the notebook, fresh out of college, just like excited,
almost like that, yeah.
Damn, why was this guy doing all this amazing stuff, right?
Yeah, it was I had heard this dude had one of the first that crew, FX crew. They were from the Bronx. They were they're the first ones that really started doing taking graffiti and making murals, where everything was themed. You had the graffiti lettering and pieces, but everything was themed. Everything went together. So you're taking graffiti, you're creating a common background, you're starting to create, infuse fine art techniques, stuff like that. So they were creating these huge murals and events and all the, 4 elements, breakdancing, all that kind of stuff. Breakdancing, DJs, MCs, all that kind of stuff. But, they already had videos. They were the first ones to have an official crew video out. And that was when they had VHS. So that tells you how long ago. And it was when we only had a couple magazines and there was only couple VHS videos, everybody in the world that was into graffiti at that time had seen those videos. You know what I'm saying? So when I met this dude, I was it was crazy because I was working at a cafe and this lady was like, oh, I know this dude that does graffiti. Now, mind you, after working, or just in general as an artist, this happens to me all the time. Every time I paint out in the city, someone comes up to me and is like, yo, my brother, cousin, baby's father does art. And then you just look at it and you're like, damn, this sucks. This person is no good, you know what I mean? Or they need a lot of help, you know what I mean? Or, it's like a pencil drawing of whatever cartoon, you know what I mean? Something, you know what I mean? It's just but what happened was she was like, oh yeah, I know this. And I'm like, okay, you know this graffiti art. So she gave me the email address. He's like, oh yeah, come out, I'm having this event. Man, I went out there. He had all the biggest name graffiti artists, Cope, T-Kid, all these big artists that I had looked up to as a kid. All these cute dudes was out there painting, had DJs, MC, breakdancing, park full of people and shit. And I was like, wow, this is what I'm talking about. And, so then, I was able to learn a lot. He used to do the B-Boy barbecue. And then we started, once I was able to establish stuff in Trenton, I was, because once I got out of, even when I was at Mercer, I started doing murals in the city. So, okay.
Okay. I'm putting the timeline together.
Okay,
right?
Okay.
I love it.
There you go. Okay.
You're already ahead of where I want to be.
Okay.
I love it. But so that was the turning point. Salvation Army, God. We'll talk about God more because I want to explore that as well. But you met this mentor as well as other mentors. You had already done a plethora of pieces, unseen pieces, just on the road expression.
Not as much,
but just your journey.
Right. I was creative, but just using, when I was in the artitude, I might do a drawing or a design, maybe one a month or one every so often.
When was the first client? Years later on?
No, this was in 99.
So, in that timeline?
Yeah. So in 96, I went to the Art Institute. 97, I moved to Trenton. That's when I first went to the Salvation Army. 99, I did my first project for the city of Trenton. And there's only a little piece of it left and it's tore up. But basically, there was a parking lot downtown, which they eventually it got tore down because they turned it into a parking garage. But I had done it wasn't that good, but the concept was good. It was basically the city of Trenton. It had George Washington. It had a hand putting in the little pieces of the thing. So that was one of my first big mural project. That was in 99. And I'd done some other projects in the city, for restaurants and, little things in 99. Then I met that artist that I was telling you about, Pose 2, and also Joe Bass and Sue. Those were some of the other people that I met at that time that really showed me how to. Also, it's basically they taught me like, yo, everything you're doing is not right. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things, like when I was coming up, since I didn't really have, other than when I was younger tagging, I didn't have somebody to show me the different techniques and different things. So it's like when you look at a magazine, you look at a video, you kind of could see certain things and you could pick up certain things, but there's some things you can't, or at least I couldn't pick up like that. You know what I mean? I needed more hands-on, like somebody like, oh, you're doing that wrong,
So they were teaching you more of like the actual
everything,
skill set, expertise
absolutely,
of how to do this stuff. Not like on the business level,
right?
Like how to actually grow your business. Just more so
right.
Like how to grow your craft.
Yeah, but the other thing is they were doing those things. They were doing projects for ad agencies. They were doing murals. They were doing, events. So, I'm not a dummy, you know what I'm saying? So like when they start doing, like nobody has to tell me, you know what I mean? Like even if I'm just helping them prime the walls, or when I first came up, man, if them dudes would have told me go stand in the corner on my head, I would have done it. You know what I'm saying? Because I was just that thirsty to learn how to do it. I just really wanted to learn how to create art and, do what they were doing. You know what I mean? Take graffiti to that next level.
So you finally had this turning point, major
right.
turning point, found the mentors, got that first gig with the city of New Jersey. When did you realize like, hey, like I'm not those things that I was previously. I could make this my fully lifestyle business. Like I could really do this. What was that thing? Did you have to have 1 client, 5 clients, 10
I mean,
clients? Like,
it was just
decision?
It was really like with those first few clients, and I started doing canvases, started selling artwork. Like in '99 and 2000, when I first did those first couple projects, and I did my first couple, sold my first couple. Once you sell a canvas, to me, like if you sell a couple canvases, you're a professional artist, whether, or semi-professional at least, you know what I'm saying? So when it's like one of those, like I believed in myself some, but once other people really started believing in me, and then I believed that they believed, it became that thing, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know what I mean? It's like once you believe in yourself and other people believe in you, there's nothing that's going to stop it, especially like somebody like me, where, I've always had that hustle mentality. I've always had that, take it to the extreme, learn and keep developing. I'm constantly learning and developing my craft. I feel like life is a lifelong journey of learning and, learning different things. But, so once, I started learning how, these different techniques and styles and started really putting them into action and, and then everything just happens. You do one project, I would ask these dudes for advice or different things like, oh, how you, what do you think's the best way to go about this? Same type thing. Like how you're saying. One of my friends was talking to me this morning. It's like when you do something on your own and you kind of got to learn all these different things, it's different than if you're working with somebody that's already done these different types of things. You could pick things up a lot faster because you're already kind of like skipping the line where they already made a lot of the mistakes and pitfalls. If you pay attention to what they're saying, and it's like, oh, you don't want to prime the whole wall one color. If you could prime the bottom green for grass and you could prime the top blue for sky, you know what I mean? Cuts down a lot of time, energy.
I like something you just said, because like this is something we can highlight for people that are watching, right? Like the people we're trying to coach, we're the perfect examples because we sought coaching, right? We sought knowledge from the experts once upon a time. And,
absolutely.
And here we are now in a position to do so for others, right?
Right.
So it's just beautiful that you got to that point of like your skill got refined. What about your mom? You eventually convinced your mother of like your skill set? Did she start believing in you ever?
No, my mom always believed in me.
In this?
Absolutely. No, what's crazy is my grandmother believed. Like my grandmother was so... I mean, there's so many people, even like now people believe, obviously. But I mean, there's so many, people don't want to believe, you have to show them, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's just like, my mom always believed, you know what I mean? Even when I didn't believe, she believed, you know what I'm saying? So, but like other people, like my grandmother, she's more old school, you know what I mean? She didn't, and a lot of people, even like my mentors in recovery and stuff, like a lot of stuff that I was talking about, People didn't do that. People didn't get art careers. You know what I mean? Like Trenton wasn't a big art place. You know what I mean? We're one of the first. I mean, there was some artists here before us, but we were able to, we're like, Trenton didn't have like a long history of graffiti like Philly and New York. You know what I mean? So we were able to come in here and really kind of set up our own thing and have our own events and traditions and, our own little scene. You know what I mean? We were able to build everything from the ground up. And, the good thing, there wasn't as much resources, especially back then. But we had like walls, there was tons of abandoned buildings that we could just paint. Nobody bothered us. It's like, you want to look at a crappy abandoned building, or do you want us to paint it and make it look better? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, the people in the neighborhood, the drug dealers, the cops, nobody really gave us any issues in the city. We were cool with everybody. People would come out, we'd have music sometimes, food, whatever. Everybody would be like kind of like a atmosphere. And then that's how we created, like with the Jersey Fresh Jam, that's the annual event that I do. We have DJs, we have live performances, we have vendors, and it's grown over the years, you know what I mean? Where we've had, a lot of different performers, that have.
When did you get the inspiration to like officially make it a business? Aerosol Illusions. What's the inspiration behind that? Was that just like an improvisation, or was it like something you thought about deeply? How did you get that decision of like, okay, I'm gonna start a business now. Right. I'm gonna make this my full lifestyle. What was that immediate decision?
I mean, I guess it was just one of those things where once I started doing projects and then doing. I worked at a cafe for a while, and then now I worked with a web design company. So a lot of it was like just seeing like, oh man, I'm making money. I need to really create a business to go. I didn't know about business plans and all that different type of stuff. But, I realized at least for taxes that I had to, start to be able to offset some of the different monies once I started having money coming in. So, and a lot of it is like once you do like a project with the city, then you do a project with a different organization and a different organization. Like all these things build up to where, like I become the source in this area of, any, not necessarily even graffiti art, but murals or public art. I've done a bunch of ground murals. There's not a lot of people that have done that, you know what I mean? So a lot of times people will call me like, oh, what type of paint, or, what is the best way to do this project? And, I usually will help them, you know what I mean? Whether they're an organization or another artist, I try to give back where I can. And then, one of the things that's really helped too is kind of creating community engagement, community interaction. So a lot of the projects that we have, especially the larger public art projects, have like a community component where, you're doing brainstorming with the community, then you design based on that, and then you wind up, painting the mural, and then you'll have like either like a paint day, or lately what we've been doing also, I did these piece murals with Capitol Health and Isles. At the end, we do handprint ceremony, so we have all the community come and put handprints on the wall to kind of, as a show of unity and, just to really get the community involved and stuff.
I think that's like important, especially for people within this field of like art, music. Most people want to go about it very individually, and it's like, look what you did. You sought mentorship, you sought friendship, you sought opportunities to engage community, build community, collaboration amongst these projects, and now you have this tight-knit unit family across the board, whether it be from other artists, people of business, opportunities, they all seamlessly go together, and it just lined up perfectly for you, right?
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I feel like that's one of the things that I've learned is to build things up from a grassroots level. So you start small and you build upon it, one thing after another, you know what I mean? You do one small project, then you learn from that, then you get another client, you build from that. You have one artist, then you work with another artist and you bring them in. I try to look for opportunities where I can include different artists, do different things, and, just really try to figure out which organizations, like I do a lot more than a lot of artists do, where I'll funding from this organization, bring the community outreach from this organization, and bring all these different parts together, where it's a lot more work on my end, but I'm able to help all these different parts work together to be able to create these projects that are, really successful and really engaging.
This is why so honored, privileged that our worlds got to clash together, because you did all this from just being a person in real life, just meeting people, talking to them, and them knowing you. And like, this is why I'm glad now your learning curve has tremendously skyrocketed about this marketing life, right? Like of our relationship, what we spoke about, what we've discussed, how like there's a big world out there, and how if you're an amazing person that's been through so many different things and you've acquired this skill set and you have the proof of the experience working with all these people, this network, that you can offer that God-given talent to the world, so long as you show them, right? And like, we're teaching you now.
Trust me, I'm paying attention. You know what I mean? Like, I'm seeing what you guys are doing, and I'm breaking it down, and I'm kind of seeing like, oh, see how they did that and this and that, and how those things are working together, and it's great. I really enjoy that part of it, and I really see, what you guys are doing is very valuable, and, it's really helping to an extent, because like you said, I do certain things on my own just by figuring it out and learning and kind of toying around with things. But, when you guys have like a way of going about it and, a plan that's working, it's good to see it. And then, I'm also taking notes like, oh, I see how that concept works, and how you're putting these different things together to showcase the different things that I've done, because like this project, like when we went through the pieces of the engineering and stuff like that, that was interesting because, I never would have thought of that, like this project been here since 2022. So it's already like 3 years old, but it's like, even though I put out some of it, people haven't really seen it showcased like that. Or maybe they did, but they might not have understood what the concepts and the meanings behind it was, because to me, I'm just like, they could look at it and read the words and they should understand. But in reality, they don't. Or it's definitely like valuable to be able to kind of break it down into pieces so that people can digest it, and also like, oh, I did see those words, but when you're saying like how they're relating to engineering, then, it makes more sense. You know what I mean?
Right? Like, what we love is that, like, I'm going to go back to the thing I just said before, right? When you're an amazing person, you have all the proof, that's awesome. You already did the whole foundational work. Saddest reality, I brought this up to you, is that there are so many amazing people on this earth and the world will never know about them. Why? Because they don't let it be known, right? And this is the beauty of like this content, this marketing stuff, because now you get to explain your creations to strangers and like get to show up for them every single day. And not only does that get more people aware of your art, your skill set, your story, but it gives you opportunity to grow your network, grow your community, invite them to the things that you're creating, let them experience those things, and then even possibly initiate some type of relationship regarding work. Or collaboration. And like, this is the power of social media, that you get to build a personal brand and like get people to just know who you are, this amazing person. Even me, as I sit across I get to see this. And now, you know what's crazy? Other people get to see the fruits of your labor, the fruits of your struggle life, of how you went from there to here, right? Wait, I told you this a little while ago when we were together, of there's an artist out there that's going through something you went through, right? In California, looking outside, that bus ride, thinking about, man, I need to get my art out there. How am I going to figure this out? And then he comes across an expert like you, Leon Rainbow, right? That's been doing this for 20, 30 years. Went through worse things than him, but still found a way. And it's showing the proof of like, the same way you watch that VHS tapes once upon a time, a kid is gonna come across pieces of content like this, or just our conversation, and see that, hey, if you do the work, you find the right people, you create things, whether it be your actual skill set or the content, it starts to get in front of people, right? So yeah, your business came a long way. So what, out of your favorite types of like offers you have, like list off some of the things, like the different types of pieces you do, and then tell me which ones are your favorites. Like, I know you tell me the murals all the time, but like you brought up this groundwork. Give me a list of all the things that you do, and then which one is your favorite, as well as like which one was your biggest project.
Man, all right. So I guess, there's a lot of different things. I've done a lot of teaching. I've done after school programming. I've done a lot of workshops. I've ran my own graffiti class called Art of the Spray. So that's where people come, we do 4 weeks online, and then we do another 8 weeks that's in person actually painting on the wall. So, on the online courses, I teach people, how to do the designs, the histories, the styles and techniques of doing graffiti art. And then, in the painting, they actually get to try to figure out, at the end of the online courses, you want somebody to have a design, characters, backgrounds, letters, theme piece. And then hopefully by the end of the 8 weeks, they could try to, be able to put that on the wall. So that's the teaching aspect, and like I said, all the different projects have some type of community outreach. And, I've had a lot of different strange projects that you never know. That's why a lot of people, when you talk about planning and different things, I'm like, oh man, if I were to try to plan this out, I would have sold myself short, so many times. I guess one of my favorite projects from last year was the Giants and the Jets, the MetLife Stadium. That was a real special project for me because just to be able to represent New Jersey in a stadium like that where there's thousands of people, sports fans or music fans, and especially it's in where the suite level, so a lot of you never know who's going to see that. So it's a lot of it was just a really good project. It took some time and some energy, but it was awesome.
What's the most expensive piece that you've done as a team, right, or as an individual?
Was the prison mural was the largest project and the biggest project and the highest amount. So that project had a total budget of $150,000.
Wow.
So that was 320 feet by 20 feet walls. So that it's like basically a football field long and 20 feet tall. It was, I'm very proud of that project. And, it has each letter, it says Trenton, huge letters, block letters, and each letter is done by a different artist. So there's 7 different artists represented. And then me and my partner, Busta, basically we did the background and all the, the other parts of it. But each artist did their own letter. And it was good that everybody was able to express, their own letter and really their own unique style, And I think that's one of the things I really like about art is having different styles. Every artist having different styles and different takes and different techniques and, all those different types of things is what really, and I think that's one of the things that can make a lot of the projects that I collaborate with and a lot of the projects that I work together because, it's me, but then also I have that network where it could be, a lot of different techniques and styles and ideas, So when you work with a lot of different artists and pull different projects together, it can be an amazing process,
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful parts of business of just idea could start with one person, but the moment you put multiple pieces in connection with that creation, ideas flow in and things could be changed or added into each other, and before you know it, a beautiful creation, a more cohesive creation comes together when there's multiple angles of wisdom and skill set and expertise. And I think that's crucial to any business or any growth, any success, excellence, right?
Right.
Teamwork is a crucial part of every single business. I've read as an individual myself, even though I'm
just like with you, right? What I see is you take the photos, the videos, the audios, the concept, and, putting all these things together with all this different team of people. And then at the end, you're putting these complete projects together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I always say there's a visionary.
Right.
In my organization, but just not only is somebody strong in their overall skill set, they have all these sub actual practical skill set. Maybe how to do this type of style, what you tell me, right? The pattern design, but Booster knows how to do something else, portrait, right? But you might be better at overall conversation. So it's definitely a good idea as an artist or any business to pick the right people to put them in place.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing. You have to know the different people's skill sets. You have to know their strengths, their weaknesses, down to, some people don't wake up early, so you might schedule them later. One person might have different styles that you might only be able to use in certain parts, you know what I mean?
And you're not going to do a $150,000 project with normal people,
right. Absolutely.
That's big to be hand-picked. They're all special people that have been through stuff. So that's another thing, right? You want big opportunities in your life, make yourself special. right? Isn't it interesting how those things correlate? When you have a very good skill set, you're a really good person,
Right.
you meet the right people, how God blesses you with unique opportunities.
It's hard for me though too, because I always feel like, damn, I don't want to be bragging. You know what I mean?
But it's not.
Right.
It's just being practical, being
Right.
logical, right?
Right.
It comes off like that. Let us be humble when we say these things.
Right.
But like,
Absolutely.
It's kind of what it is,
Right.
right? Like, you don't get a super big project if
Right.
you don't have the capabilities to do that type of project.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is that, you know, you have to, like, that's one of the things that I have a track record of creating successful projects. You know what I mean? Like, almost all the projects, you know, that's one of the things that I've had to learn. There's been certain things that have happened that's beyond my control that I've had to let a project go. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, I was supposed to do a ground mural at a city park, and I really wanted to do this ground mural, but the city had to refurbish the basketball court for me to do the mural, and that never happened, so I wasn't able to do the mural. But that's beyond my control. I had to let that go. You know, that's one of the hardest things too for me too, is to let a project go. And I rarely do that because, you know, 95% of, even 99% of my projects have successful outcomes where, you know, everything goes off without a hitch. You know, I have, like you're saying, a unique skill set where I've been able to figure out different projects. I'm able to project manage. A lot of the stuff, you know, a lot of the mural organizations, they have separate things like project manager. You know, then they have, you know, lead artists. But a lot of that, I wind up doing a lot of that stuff, but I'm able to do it because I've been doing it for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like the same way we were just talking about like being selective about your team members, I think it's good that people understand that you need to be selective about your clients as well.
Absolutely.
Like me, I'm here to serve, but not everyone is, I don't want to say worthy to be served, but it's like be very wise about who you spend your time on, because this is your legacy. You have a gift and a talent to share with the world. Focus on projects that are most bound to be successful.
Right.
Not just on a money basis, but just
Right.
more so on a serving basis.
Right.
Your team's
Right.
legacy and your business's legacy, as well as your project, your client's project, right? Me, I like working with very specific industries too. Like, it excites me.
Right.
Some people will take the work, but it's not always worth it. It ends up not being worth it. It's like, damn, like you just took time away from us on this earth to serve you, and you weren't worth it.
Right. Even like with a lot of the artists, like it's like one of those, like, this is gonna come off crazy, but it's like basically you can't un-asshole somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could teach you how to paint, but if you're an asshole, I can't make you not an asshole. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather work with an artist that's not as good as somebody but has a better attitude than somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I want to work with somebody that's going to be enjoyable to be around, that's going to be cool, that's going to, you know, be able to go with the flow and kind of work together. Like, I don't want to work with anybody that's going to be a pain. I don't care how talented you are. I just don't want to deal with that. You know what I mean? And I won't. If that happens, I mean, I could still be cool with you. You know what I mean? Me and Isaiah could be cool, but if Isaiah's an asshole, I'm not working with him no more. That's it. That's it. Like, you won't work on another project with me. And that's fine. You know, you do your projects, I'll do mine. It's cool. But if I'm not vibing with the person, you know, then I can't. Because, you know, if you're out, especially doing what we do, you know, you're doing creative things, that negative energy can really, you know, weigh on a project. You know what I mean? Like, when you're trying to create, you can't have that negativity around you. You know what I mean? You have to, there's so much other stuff that could be negative, and there's so many other challenges that happen during a project that you need all people that's going to be as positive as possible. And like I said, you could teach people a lot of different skills. You know what I mean? Art, like, I feel like if somebody was a graffiti artist and they was just starting out, within the course that I teach, they could become, say, 50% better just by taking the course.
Yeah, because like, again, that's the beauty of expertise, right? Even us. We've brought people who don't know nothing from the Stone Age.
Right.
To understand why they need to be doing content and marketing.
Right.
Same thing, it's why though? Why is because, like, make yourself capable, build up the proof, and make it undeniable. So when it's time to share this gift, not only with your clients, with your students, you are more than capable enough to teach them in a streamlined way, right? To replicate the success you've had, to replicate the journey you've had, to avoid mistakes you've had.
Right.
And that's so beautiful as human beings that we're even capable of doing that. What's the future for Aerosol Illusions? Like, do you want to just keep doing these big murals? Is there like certain like messages you want to speak in art? You know, like how there's like type of artists that like reveal the truth in their art. Like, are you like that type of like, you know, person? Or
No, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I'm more of like, you know, I want to have like, ideally what I'd like to do is just to be able to get to a point where I have like full creative freedom and somebody just gives me a wall and gives me a budget and lets me do me. That's the dream.
that would be a good idea.
That's the dream. It seems like there's certain people, once you get to a certain, at least in some ways, it seems like once you get to a certain level, you could do that, right? But then you hear people are starting to do podcasts and stuff like that where they're like, oh, well, I had this. I'm like, damn, that's the same thing I did. I thought you were ahead of me where you didn't have to deal with that stuff no more. But, you know, I guess maybe they do or maybe they don't. You know what I mean?
It's case to case. Like me and my friends, we always joke about this, about some of our clients would be like, oh yeah, like this he has a marketing degree, you know, he has a content degree. He went to school for 9 years. He's done this, you know, he knows better than me. It's like, that's our funny joke of sarcasm, right?
I got you.
Some people are so preference based, they can't like think outside of their wants and needs and not allow that trust of creative reign, right?
I mean, where I'm totally the reverse. You know what I mean?
What do you mean? Like,
because right? Think about it like this. I don't like it when people try to tell me what to do and direct me. I'm the artist. You're paying me to do what I do. You know what I mean? It's good if you give me some concepts, right? It makes sense. But like, okay, so you have like, okay, these are like this project, right? So we want to do some Afrofuturism. We want black and brown kids, and we want, you know, creating powerful, you know, these are the principles of engineering. Do your thing. Boom. And now look at these walls. You know what I'm saying?
I'm agreeing with you. Those are my favorite type of.
But like with me, I'm like, yo, you know, I know a little bit, but I don't know about creating content like the way that you do. You know what I mean? I don't know setting up photo and video cameras and what's going to be the right angles and all that. That's not my role. You know what I mean? I'm just going to, you know, let you do your thing and, you know, you do what you tell me basically until, you know what I mean?
That's why we love you.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just like, yo, let you do your thing. This is what you do.
But just for the people out there that are new to business, like, you have to learn how to navigate.
I know.
And eventually you find your dream people. We call it our dream client, right? They check off the items on the list of like personality, budget, circumstance, mindset, willingness to cooperate, willingness to trust you, expertise, like all these little bucket lists. Those are your dream clients.
There you go.
So like,
I like that.
I could see you definitely have that like avatar, what that could look like for you in terms of the art world.
Absolutely.
A million percent. But we love working with those type of people, you know?
Right.
I guess going to new artists, since we're talking about them, you have an opportunity here, but it's like, and you could talk about the entirety, right? Briefly, but like what mistakes should they avoid when starting this journey? Because this is not an easy journey, right? Like business in its entirety is not an easy journey, but being an artist specifically that's from the streets, that's struggling with family, that's struggling with school, that's struggling with money, et cetera, like how do you navigate that? What mistakes should they avoid?
Shoo.
It's a deep question.
Don't do drugs. No, I'm just. Right. I feel like a lot of it is like you really have to have a lot of, you know, you can't really be thin-skinned. You know what I mean? You're going to be told no a lot. You know what I mean? So that's like one of the things. You really have to be determined. You know, you really have to want to do this. If you don't, then it might not be the career for you. You know what I'm saying? But in reality, I feel like the best thing is really to learn your basics, you know what I mean? Learn how to create, you know, learn how colors work, learn how perspective works, you know, learn the mechanics of art, you know, learn about art and how to create art. And then the other part is developing your own style. To me is a lifelong journey. You know, what I was doing, like the murals that I first started out isn't what I'm doing now. You know what I mean? What I was doing 10 years ago isn't what I'm doing now. So, you know, that part I feel like you just have to keep going. You know, you find something unique that you do, and then you kind of put that, you know, what I do, which is, I don't know, a lot of people don't do shit like this, but I have like a mental library. So it's like, okay, this is this style of lettering, this is this pattern. And, I try to keep those in my mind and in my soul. Like, and when I need to go in there, I grab that tool out of that toolbox and I build with that, you know what I mean? Where I could just create things on the fly type thing. But, a lot of people, you want to try to get your skills together and create like, as you go. But a lot of it is also, if I was going to say to learn anything, would be to learn business. You know what I mean? Because that's something that I had to learn on my own, which was much harder. I feel like if I would have learned like what a business plan was in the beginning, if I would have learned how to create a marketing plan and all the different things, like it probably would have, I eventually figured it out, but it would have been a lot easier if you learned business. One of my mentors, the dude I was telling you, Pose, he told me like he went to school for business because he was always going to be an artist. And that's the same way I feel. Like, if you're an artist, you're going to be able to create. And I feel like that's the other thing too, is focus on learning to create. Because a lot of people now, like, it's cool to be an artist. You know what I mean? It's probably social media. Everybody wants to be an artist. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to go to art events. Everybody wants to drink wine. Everybody wants to go to gallery openings. But that's not creating art. You know what I mean? Those are important aspects to it. You know what I mean? To me, like, that's the dividends. If you start to be a successful artist, or you're going to network or, whatever, those are the things that happen once you start to create art. That's after the creation, So you have to have sometimes, but, I feel like if you're an artist, the focus should be creating art.
Like all those little tad bits, even with marketing and social media and this online space, we have a lot of pieces on the charcuterie board we get to enjoy, right? I love the things you said because I agree with it completely. Even my advice for young business owners out there is get really good at the skill set.
Right.
Pick your angle of that skill set. Learn business. What's the fastest way to learn business? Learn from mentors, right? Find
Absolutely.
mentorship, because it's like even us. I have mentors. I look to people. Speed up my learning curve tremendously. And
Absolutely.
Then, like, the fifth thing I would say is just like focus on the thing that's going to get you there and do that times 100 over and over. Don't get caught up in all the luxuries of it all, right? It's focus on the grittiness of what it actually is, the process. Too often in this life we focus on the gratification of receiving the result. Oh, money's in. Painting's done, but it's like that's not where the glory is. Where the glory is the ideation, the conversation, the process of getting the material, the mistakes that happen along the way. Focus on that. Do that 1,000 times, over and over and over and over again. Watch what happens. People focus on output, not input. If you focus on input over and over of whatever that is, considering your machine is designed a certain way and you're feeding it with the right things, your output will always be amazing.
It's just like one of those, it's just like LeBron James, right? What do? Shoot basketballs all the time, right? Michael Jordan, any sports player, But for some reason, people don't do that with art, you know what I mean? You got to learn skill sets and practice skill sets, you know what I mean? Like with me, like I feel like that's an important thing for me to do too, is to balance commercial projects, paying projects with my personal artwork. You know what I'm saying? Like when I do graffiti, that's personal to me. I play with different letter forms and color schemes and different things. And yes, I can apply that to the different commercial things that I do, but I have to have that exploration and that creativity to be able to balance out the strictness and the rigidity of creating projects that are for money, you know what I mean? Or creating projects that are less creative.
I mean, we find that same tug of war happens with social media and content and creation, because it's like, of course I want to create some like loony bin project where I'm just doing something that I want to create, right? I don't really care what anybody else thinks. Like I see things I want to create.
Right, like a skate video.
Sure, like just a random project. But it's like, I'm going to do the boring thing sometimes too. Just finding that happy medium in between of like, hey, this is what is paying. Often the boring things pay the most. Right. We know
absolutely
this in business, but it's like finding a balance and not losing that love, that fire in between the mix of that, of growing your business. I see that happens with people too. Like skateboarding was like that for me, where it's like it became so, you got demos, you had paperwork to sign, and it killed the fire of it.
Right, right.
Like, it took me away from it. I was like, man, like I'm not even skating no more. I'm just,
Right.
I have to show up. I have to perform. It's different.
Right.
So just finding that balance, right? I want to go back.
Okay.
Because this is a big topic for me. You know this, but you brought up God. How you found God when you were at the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Like, what God do you believe in, number one, or what's your idea of God, and like, how did that save you, right? Because I think it's important. We live in a godless world, Leon, where so many people are struggling with things you struggle with,
Right.
things I struggle with, whether it's their shelter, their food, their mindset, their mental health, physical health, etc. And it's like, look at the amazing things that's been done in our lives,
Right.
because of this relationship we established with God.
For me, like, when I first went to the Salvation Army, like I said, that reintroduced me to Christ. That's a Christian organization. So they didn't care if you were Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever you were going to church on Sunday. That was part of the program, which was fine with me because I was raised Catholic. My stepfather was Lutheran. But after a certain point, I didn't have to go to church anymore when I was a kid. So I kind of pushed that aside, especially once I started getting into drugs and stuff. But when I came back and, I realized, like, with Christ, and I believe in that, I believe Jesus Christ died for our sins, that type of thing, right? But at a certain point, I wasn't feeling the organization of religion. So, because to me, I believe that God or Christ is in us. You know what I mean? So I feel like I don't have to go to building per se and do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to, go there. I don't have to pay. I don't have to do all that. I don't have to have somebody preach at me. A lot of times I'll listen to, different spiritual things. But a lot of it, I believe in spirituality. I believe in prayer and meditation. And one of the things that, just being in the different situations that I have in my life, there has to be a God, because otherwise, there's so many different things that I wouldn't be here if there wasn't a God. You know what I mean? And, a lot of times, I need, like in recovery, teach you to have a higher power, something that's bigger than the drugs and that's positive, and is bigger than you, because it's just one of those things where I know that something has to help me. I choose to call that Christ, you know what I mean? And, I believe that, I'm here to help other people, you know what I mean? And, and that's what I believe. I believe in doing the right thing for the right reasons, you know what I mean? And I stand on that, helping the next person,
I love that. Yeah. Like, I heard something the other day, but they were basically saying how practice sometimes is greater than prayer, right? Like how, and why I bring that up in this regard is because it's like you became a practitioner of that love and that wisdom you received in the pathway of Christ. Like, I'm a Christian as well. There's things I don't like about the idea of religion, but that love, that idea of a higher power, the Father, Jesus, whether it's Father, many people see it in different ways, right?
Absolutely.
God in general. The idea that somebody created me, somebody's above me, somebody cares about me, and I have a purpose on this earth. My life is not meaningless.
Absolutely.
Right? That is so powerful for a lost soul in the middle of the forest.
Absolutely.
Right? Of like, you're a lion, you could become a lion, you don't have to be this lost deer that's kind of dumb and just eating grass. You could have a purpose. You could really do something beautiful in this life. Like, the same way you have been served, now go serve others. I love that you also bring up like that the way other people practice is not the way you need to practice, but just understanding that there is a greater power, that all of this is not for no reason, that even people as terrible as us have done terrible things to ourselves and to others, that whatever it may be, maybe I'm dragging it, but like,
I got you.
Right? That it's like there's hope for people like us, and there's success and happiness and purpose, and it's like people can have that.
But that's the thing too, is that Jesus Christ, surrounded himself by sinners, right? Oh, yeah. If you're not a sinner, you don't need Christ, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's for us. That's for people that sin. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, we're able to give back. People have given, have blown life into me, literally. You know what I mean? It's like I've come such a long way from where I was, And then, like I say, I definitely try to give back where I can to people. If anybody needs help, You know, I feel like that's my part when I give back. You know what I mean? Is like help people that want to help themselves. You know what I'm saying?
This is why I asked you the question before. I mean, I was being sarcastic,
Right.
but like how your art not only can satisfy a person's project preferences,
Right.
your individualistic style preferences, but maybe intertwining this overall purpose of like, how do I bring glory to God within my art and serve people and do this whole conglomerate
Right.
of meeting my need, my project's need, and even God. Interesting, right?
Absolutely.
I wonder how. I mean, even these patterns that I
Right.
look at with your art, I see God, right? Like even sculptures, you
Right.
see it. It's like, wow, it's so beautiful. Like there's.
Yeah.
this
I
is
mean,
cool.
and I like to do different things that are positive and make people think about different things, you know, like I've done 2 series. During COVID, I did 1 series of 3 different murals, which was called We Are Survivors. And that was like us getting through COVID and getting to the next side, you know, and like I was able to put like, you know, different symbols in each mural that kind of brought them together and meant certain things to me and then could possibly mean things to other people. But like one of the things that I came up with as a visual marker for those murals was a white flag with a heart in it. So it's like we're not fighting anymore and the love, you know, but that was like We Are Survivors. You know, that was that series. And then the next series, which I'm still is ongoing. I'm working with Capitol Health and Isles, is the Increase the Peace mural series. So we've done about 5 or 6 of those murals. And basically each mural is a representative of peace. But a lot of them are depending on where they are, what organizations is involved, you know, what people are involved. And, you know, they have different, but that one of the things that I use to signify that one is an origami dove, you know, because a dove is meant for peace. But then also the origami is like the technical and the actual, the hands that are folding it. You know what I mean? So it's like that aspect of it.
I love that. Man.
Yeah.
Like this conversation was super like amazing for me because it's like I got to know you, but I wanted to know more about that origin. I want the world to know about your art because like when I see it, like I said, I see God's glory. I see something amazing. This didn't come overnight. These beautiful creations, every single pattern, every single stroke, it has meaning, it has pain, it has purpose. And it's when we put ideas within these projects that we can really make major influence upon this world, you know, in a positive light. I want to see art utilized more to like do good things, even like content. Even these words we speak have volume, they have weight to change somebody's life. So it's like to share this conversation was an honor, Leon. Like, if there was anything else you would want to say to that artist out there or anybody that's like interested in who you are as a person, what would you say to them?
I would just say, you know, not to give up on your dreams, you know, because long as you could follow the path, do the right things, and keep learning and keep creating, then you can do anything, you know what I mean? Like I said, when I went to the Salvation Army, if you told me, you know, that I'd be painting huge murals on the state prison, if I'd be painting it in stadiums that, you know, like Giant Stadium or the Eagles Stadium or the Philly Stadium. Like, if you told me that, I wouldn't have believed you. You know what I mean? But here I am. You know, it took me 25 years, but at the same time, I'm still here, you know, and I feel like that's one of the things for people just to not give up on their dreams. And if I could do it, they could do it. You know, that's the important thing. If I could do it, you could do it.
Guys, excellent episode. I'm going to link all of Leon Rainbow's stuff. Follow him, show him love, look at his art. It's God's creation. It's very possible you could do it. See you guys on the next episode. Yeah, peace.